This episode is brought to you by Nespresso. Gift magical mornings with Nespresso Vertuo Pop. Compact and stylish, Vertuo Pop is made to meet every morning coffee craving. From espresso to coffee, hot or iced, at the click of a button. And celebrate the season with Nespresso's limited edition coffee flavors. Sweet almond and hibiscus, cinnamon and candied tamarind, and festive double espresso. Magic in the making. Shop the holiday gift collection exclusively at Nespresso.com.
Welcome to Marvelous Disney, the podcast that discusses the most recent doings at one of the more dynamic divisions of the Walt Disney Company, which is, of course, Marvel Entertainment. This is entertainment writer Jim Hill, and my co-host, the amazing Aaron Adams, and I are recording this week's episode on Wednesday, July 5th, 2023. So, quick aside here, Aaron, how was your 4th?
Explosive and lots of ammo cartridges laying out in the patio from exuberant neighbors celebrating.
When you live out in the woods, you can hear the various fireworks shows from the towns around you. You can't necessarily see them. And it was very damp out here as well, so a lot of shows. In fact, I'll honestly be surprised if a couple of the fireworks shows that were postponed don't happen this evening. But anyway, speaking of it being Wednesday, July 5th, we are now 2 weeks out from the start of the 2023 edition of Comic-Con International down in San Diego. Preview night gets underway on July 19th. That's a Wednesday, runs from 6 to 9. And then Comic-Con proper gets underway on Thursday, July 20th. A show floor opens at 9:30 and then stays open till 7. And that continues through Sunday, July 23rd. By the way, the show floor closes early, folks. And I learned that the hard way one year. But it closes at 5 on Sunday. Now, Aaron and I talked on last week's show about how Marvel Studios, along with Lucasfilm, Netflix, Universal Pictures, and Sony Pictures, have all opted out of doing big presentations in Hall H.
So there's no one going. There's no reason to talk about it. What are they even doing this year? There's no one showing up, right?
Okay. Well, funny thing, Aaron, the folks at Marvel Comics reached out and wanted to remind us that they're still going to San Diego because as a company that publishes comic books, they want to support an event like Comic-Con International, which, by the way, when it started out back in 1970, it was the Golden State Comic Book Convention. Back then, only 300 people showed up in total for the event. These years, typically, Comic-Con International draws as many as 135,000. And so the nice folks at Marvel Comics, and it's like, yes, they are coming and they are paneling. And as of 7 days ago, this year's San Diego Comic-Con International was completely sold out of passes. So don't feel like, oh, I need to be supportive. Let me drive down to San Diego because you can't get in. If you don't have a pass, you can't get in. But if you are going, there are going to be several Marvel panels. On Thursday, July 20th, there's the Designing the X-Men, a This Week in Marvel special event. This is a live edition of, Aaron, you're not going to believe this. There's other people who do podcasts about Marvel.
No, I thought we were the only ones.
Well, I'm as shocked as you are. But the This Week in Marvel podcast is going to sit down with a bunch of artists and such to discuss the Designing the X-Men. That's going to be, by the way, in room 7AB from 4 to 5 p.m., again on Thursday. And then that same day, from 5 to 6 p.m. in room 11, there's going to be the Art of Storytelling. Jumping ahead now to Friday, July 21st, from 3 to 4 p.m. in room 6DE, there's the Marvel Heroes, Hulks, and Super Soldiers panel. And this is Marvel Studios editor-in-chief C.B. Cebulski. And this one actually kind of, it's like, man, I wish I could go. J. Michael Straczynski's going to be there. And he's kind of doing a twofer because I want to say, is it Friday?
Babylon 5 animated thing?
That's it exactly. They are actually having the premiere, I want to say, on Saturday night.
Nice.
So, and what's cool is immediately afterwards, evidently, the cast of the original show, the ones that have come in and doing voice work on the Babylon 5 animated thing, are going to be there. So it's like, oh, I want to go.
Okay.
Anyway, jumping ahead, Friday from 4:15 to 5:15, again in room 6DE, we have Marvel Fanfare. And again, this is the editor-in-chief sitting down with Joe Quesada. And that's what I love about this is you have two editors from Marvel sitting down and, discussing, the beauty and the secrets of comic making under the Marvel brand. Then, stepping away from Marvel comic books for a moment, the Marvel Multiverse role-playing game from Glass Cannon Network. Now, mind you, this is actually away from the convention center. This is going to be over at the Omni Hotel in the Grand Ballroom up on the 4th floor. But from 5:30 to 8:30, they're going to be, showcasing this role-playing game. Then, if we jump to July 22nd, the Saturday, from 3 to 4 p.m. in room 6A, this will be the next big thing. And the bullet point for this panel is the future of the Marvel Universe will be unveiled as a special panel. And look forward to shocking announcements. So if anybody attends and wants to share, please get a hold of myself and Aaron. And then finally, July 23rd, the Sunday, between 10:30 and 11:30, again in room 6A, it's the Women of Marvel. The Women of Marvel return to San Diego. Join us for a lively discussion with Marvel talent across publishing, digital media, and the studios. What's it like for women working in the industry today, and what's next for Marvel's women-led projects? Plus, stay for the end of the panel for an exclusive giveaway. So, lots of Marvel comic-related stuff at this year's Comic-Con International in San Diego. And apologies to the folks who work on the print side of Marvel for suggesting that this year's event wouldn't be up to snuff.
I don't know. It just seems kind of weird to have a comic book company at Comic-Con. That's a little out of their lane. That's where you promote movies and TV shows. I think they should go to the Cannes Film Festival, where comic books are naturally the prime subject. I think I've gotten something backwards, Jim. I don't know.
Just face it, for so long now. I mean, what Comic-Con was. You stood in line all day, in the hot sun outside of Hall H because you wanted to be there as Kevin Feige teed up. What was coming next. Now, we're having this stuff happen outside of Comic-Con this month. In fact, did you see the Benedict Cumberbatch reveal just over the past 24?
That he was going to be donning the levitation cape one more time in the near future for Doctor Strange 3?
Well, we don't know for sure.
Oh, it could be a team-up movie that he's appearing in.
There we go.
Okay.
All right. So Cumberbatch, who was a guest on the JW3 Speaker Series, said there will be some Marvel capers in the making next year. Now, again, caveat here, we still have the writer's strike going on. There is, a threat of a Screen Actor Guild strike. So we're hoping Mr. Cumberbatch is correct.
Unless he's gotten a hold of the Time Stone once again. Then anything is possible.
There we go. Okay, and again, typically, when Kevin Feige is on stage in Hall H, we also hear about what Marvel Studios is readying for Disney Plus, the limited series. And there's been a question out there about whether or not we're going to get a second season of WandaVision. And Deborah Jo Rupp, who you may remember played the comical next door, wasn't she the wife of the boss who came to the house and was choking, but she factored in throughout the whole season. Anyway, she recently did an interview with Berkshire Magazine, and to hear her talk, Agatha Coven of Chaos really should be considered the second season of WandaVision. She described this new MCU series as, well, again, it's the second season of WandaVision from Marvel. It's very much like American Horror Story, where each season is this whole new kind of thing. I was shocked when they called me because I really thought that would be it, and I was fine with that. But when they called, I got so excited because it's a character I never get to play. She's going to be great fun. So I'm kind of intrigued by that.
I don't quite agree with the American Horror Story thing, because that's an anthology where everybody's playing a completely different character, and the plot's not in any way connected to the next one, although they did try and tie them in later seasons. But more to the idea of, yeah, sure, it could be considered season 2 of WandaVision, but I would rather consider it to be like the Xth chapter of Phase 4. Because that's what we're still dealing with, are phases in these big, huge stories.
This is true.
And so it's like, well, it's like taking a chapter out of Game of Thrones and calling that like its own thing. It's like, no, that's part of a much bigger tale. And I think this is just more a chapter of Phase 4.
Okay, well, I guess we'll actually have to see Agatha Coven of Chaos when it comes out next year to see, or maybe there is something going on there about reinventing characters or that sort of thing.
Are we officially in Phase 5 yet?
I believe so.
Yeah, wasn't like Ant-Man Quantumania the beginning of that?
I want to say yes, but again, given how weird Marvel's been lately about Ant-Man Quantumania, in fact, did you see this is so strange, it's coming out of Japan.
Okay.
All of this footage from the Bill Murray plotline for Ant-Man Quantumania that evidently Murray shot for weeks. And initially was such a huge part of the storyline, and all of that stuff, virtually got tossed out of the film. We only get that one scene now in the restaurant, and then bang.
Does Japan have like the extra footage or something? What's the story with the connection to Japan there?
I don't entirely understand that. In fact, that makes me think I really need to break out my copy of Quantumania, the Blu-ray, and it's like,
unless they added extra footage for overseas, like Asian markets, didn't they do that with like one of the, it was Iron Man 3 or something that they shot something in Shanghai that was specifically for the release in that market. But I also kind of think that there's been some movie that had extra footage that was specifically for the Asian market, and it could have been an extra clip in that, but I don't know.
I want to say the extra content that was shot for the Chinese market was like 2 minutes, and I want to say it had the world's most awkward product placement. It's like, there was a big name star for the Chinese market that then drank a milk energy drink.
Yeah. That was, okay. I wasn't hallucinating that. All right.
No.
Maybe they did something similar to that, like for Japan markets, where it's like, hey, we got you over here for a minute. Let's also throw in, oh, by the way, after I've been done defeating a bad guy for the day, I like nothing more than a nice, refreshing bubble milk. Yes, bubble milk.
Yeah. So, all right, we'll have to. I'll drill down more into that, and we'll circle back on that story.
Okay.
The other thing that, again, remember last year, when Comic-Con happened in 2022, Thor: Love and Thunder had just come out on July 8th, and it was very front of mind, and people were talking about those mid-credit scenes. Russell Crowe as Zeus telling his son Hercules to go find Thor and avenge me. I bring that up because Russell Crowe is now actually out doing concerts. Who knew he was a singer? And he was at the Thermal Hotel just recently and was sharing with the press there that something came up the other day. Someone tweeted out that in DC, I'm Superman's dad. In Disney Plus Marvel, I'm Thor, which is Hercules' father.
No, wait, that he's in Disney Marvel, he's Zeus.
Oh, well, again, I'm reading what he said. Evidently, he was in his cups. But you're right. Okay. All right. But I guess what Russell meant to say was in Disney Plus, I'm Zeus, who is who is Hercules' father, and then in Sony Marvel, I'm Kraken the Hunter's father. And and he just waited for a moment, and he said, I'm fertile across space and time.
I was kind of wondering about that. If Sony is so eager to try and tie everything Spider-Man into the MCU, why in the hell would you cast Zeus as the father of Kraven? Like that really didn't make any sort of sense of like you guys just used them in a movie. I mean, not Sony. Sony didn't use it, but Marvel did. But why would you cast someone who's already been cast within the MCU if you're trying to kind of backdoor your way in storytelling wise? That just seemed like a poor casting decision. Not that Russell's a bad actor and he can't play the role. He can, fine. It was just that he was already been used. So
No. I mean, you're not wrong. And it is kind of an intriguing casting decision for that very same reason. You know, he clearly has a role and an identity in the MCU, and it kind of does muddy the water for Spunk about, okay, he's this guy here and this guy there. But what was kind of interesting is only a Russell Crowe, given his career, can talk about what's going on with comic book movies today. And I had a really kind of thoughtful response, which was the filmmakers that they're using and the assets that they're giving those filmmakers are getting better and better and better. And it's now probably simpler to give more nuance to these characters because the audience has grown with them. Maybe the first few of these comic book movies had to be very simple, but now the audience has grown with them and they want nuance. So I think at first there might be a misconception about the way comic book movies are made and having to work against blue screen, but now they've changed. Now, I bring that up, Aaron, because James Gunn over at DCU, he actually brought up in a recent interview this very same issue that Russell was talking about, but suggested that even though Marvel and DC are trying to do more nuanced, more ambitious films, they could still do better. As he points out, embrace a wider range of tones when it comes to the films they're making, the stories they're trying to tell. This is the quote. Now that's happening. It's relatively new. And the same thing with Marvel. I mean, even the MCU, relatively new. So I don't know if there's any innate things about tone. But I think what both the MCU and DCU, I think what they both need to do is have a wider range of tones than they presently do. I mean, I think they work, but they could do a better job.
I don't know. I mean, when you add things into the pile like Werewolf by Night, that black and white, that old 60s Saturday movie of the week kind of vibe it had going, I think that's a good stretch in the tone category. I do think that Thor Love and Thunder almost went to a breaking point with the silly humor. And then there are other movies that are a little bit more serious. I think James Gunn did a fine job of having fun and seriousness within the Guardians last outing. Yeah, I mean there is usually the tight, bright, and keep it moving kind of thing where, you know, there's always a quip and it's always very colorful and whatnot. I don't ever want to see it get totally desaturated colors and gritty and dark for the sake of gritty and dark. But when we get to the Blade movie, I sure as heck do want to see a lot of blood, and because they're vampires by nature, they're going to be a hell of a lot more night scenes, which will make it dark. And so, I think, you know, he's right. There's still room to grow, but I also think we've got the proper projects in the pipeline to allow for that growth, hopefully.
Okay. Here's hoping. But that said, speaking of the future of Marvel, back in April, Marvel Comics editor-in-chief C.B. Cebulski, who we, by the way, mentioned, will be sitting down with Joe Quesada at this year's Comic-Con and doing paneling together, floated the idea that Marvel Comics is testing the water, so to speak, about holding a Marvel-centric convention event. We're talking about something that would be separate from, say, the D23 Expo, or certainly separate from what we were just talking about, the Comic-Con International down in San Diego. CB went on to say there's a lot of different ways we have to think about it, but that's kind of an intriguing idea.
Well, I mean, if you have, first you got the comic books, then you've got the films, then you've got the TV shows that you put on Disney Plus. So you've got three different distinct arms that you can promote, right? And if you do that, you also then don't have to share the spotlight with anybody else. Because let's say James Gunn cracks it out of the park with his, you know, first teaser trailer for Superman Legacy. And what if it blows the snot out of whatever Marvel put up on screen that day? All the buzz goes to DC, and just by a comparison level, everyone's like, oh, boo, DC's doing better than Marvel because that looked better at the Comic-Con convention. Well, if it's just a Marvel panel and you're just showing off Marvel products, you don't have to worry about, does our competition look more sparkly than we do on this outing? That's not a bad idea.
No, it's certainly not. In fact, in the second half of today's show, we're going to talk about that Stan Lee documentary that just recently bowed on Disney Plus, and that made its debut at the Tribeca Film Festival earlier this year. And so much of Stan's story and Marvel's story is based in New York City and Manhattan and the boroughs and that sort of thing. I can get behind that idea, but on the other hand, if I were trying to make the decision, well, do I want to go to this Marvel, only fan event? The fact that something like that might premiere there, or I would get my first chance to see that might be the difference between, okay, I'm buying a plane ticket, I'm getting a hotel room, I got to check this out. Right. So anyway, speaking of which, folks, when we get back, Aaron and I are going to talk about that documentary as well as episode 3 of Secret Invasion. But first, this.
The family that vacations together stays together. At least, that was the plan. Except now, the Dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for the stay.
Every story you love, every invention that moves you, every idea you wished was yours, all began as nothing. Just a blank page with a blinking cursor, asking a simple question. What do you see? Great ideas start on Mac. Find out more on apple.com/Mac.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? But with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers, a network of 130 million of them, in fact. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills, and did I say job title? See how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
As Mr. Testa always likes to say, well, in this case, it's not a hearty round of congratulations. In this case, it's a sincere apology. Rogers the Musical opened at Disney California Adventure last Friday, June 30th. And you'll remember, Aaron, on last week's show, I was mentioning that when I went to the D23 Expo and saw, I keep calling it the We Can Do This All Day number that Mark Shaman wrote, but I think it's actually called Save the City. That number's still in the show. However, the rest of the songs that have been written, the rest of the stuff has been staged, evidently is flat out wonderful. This 30-plus minute long live musical that's being presented in that Hollywood Pictures backlot, or excuse me, the Hollywoodland part of that theme park, universally great reviews. All 4 performances are selling out every day. So kudos to the creative team there. I guess my one complaint is that it's still, at this point, folks, scheduled to end on August 31st. And if I'm being completely honest here, I'd love for this thing to extend, because starting on September 1st of this year is when DCA start presenting its Oogie Boogie Bash. And the best of all possible worlds, I would make a special trip out west to try to do Oogie Boogie Bash as well as catch Rogers the Musical. But I guess if you aren't going to get out there, folks, if you head over to YouTube, there's a number of videos already up, Rogers the Musical. And not to give too much away, but they really do lean into the Steve Rogers, Peggy Carter story. And do a really sweet job with it. Congratulations to the team. And if you manage to get out to California this summer and happen to be over at the Disneyland Resort, maybe make an effort to see this one, folks. Okay, now to pivot to episode 3 of Secret Invasion. Before we get started here, wanted to share something that Secret Invasion director Ali Salim recently shared with The Hollywood Reporter. Nick Fury, we all know this because we've all seen the teaser trailer for the Marvels, but Nick Fury is featured in the next theatrical release from Marvel Studios. And in fact, remember, once upon a time, the Marvels was supposed to be released to theaters on July 28th. And the interesting thing is that the final episode of Secret Invasion would have dropped on Wednesday, July 26th. So this was Kevin Feige's dream. With that level of connective tissue, that sort of, with virtually no lag time story-wise between the story that Marvel Studios was telling with a limited series and then with its next theatrical release. And more to the point, you would have had to go to the movies to see what happened next with Nick Fury. But then February 17th of this year, Marvel's got pushed off to November 10th, and so that's not happening anymore. But back to Ali Salim now. He recently got asked, while he was working on Secret Invasion, if he'd had to communicate with the Marvel's production team. And his response to The Hollywood Reporter was, the answer is yes. They're not protracted conversations. It was just simply, where do you need Fury to be? And then, okay, you need him here? Great. And then we write into that. And as to why that was the approach, Ali flat out said, it's because this is all above my pay grade. The decisions about what's happening next with these characters are, it's Mr. Feige and friends. So,
by the way, if I were the one taking that phone call,
yep,
and someone said, hey, I'm writing the next movie, where's Nick Fury got to be? Like, oh, we forgot to tell you. We had him get fired from S.H.I.E.L.D. He's actually working at Baskin-Robbins. He's filling in for Ant-Man on his days off. Yeah, go ahead and write that. Hang up the phone. Call back like a week later. Be like, oh, you fell for it. I'm sorry. It was just a joke.
Wow. That would actually be fun to film. Okay. Now, I also wanted to follow up on something that Aaron had said earlier. You had mentioned as part of episode 1, when Nick Fury returns to Earth, and again, he's been out traveling the cosmos, supposedly looking for a new home for the Skrulls. And we get that pillar of light, we get some sound effects, but we never see the ship.
Right.
And I bring this up because you mentioned that seemed, kind of on the cheap side. Did you get the dialogue in this most recent episode about how in the attack in the square that we saw at the end of episode 1, that 2,000 people had been killed, which is why the world is on edge.
Where the hell were they all hiding? I didn't see them.
Well, no, that's it exactly. I mean, no disrespect. It's a well-staged scene, but I would put the number of people in that square at 200, 300 max. And so after the fact, to be trying to sell this as, 2,000 people were killed. And I mean, I get that they're using dialogue to up the stakes because I'm sorry, the visuals did not put that across. But I'm beginning to think, Aaron, you were genuinely on to something, that this is the first of the Marvel limited series where sort of the budget retraction is showing up on screen. Though I did love the scene today in the cafe at the museum where the hero confronted Gravik and everybody else in the cafe suddenly stood up and became Gravik. And it was, I thought, between the fact that the camera moved and it was a brilliant use of visual effects, very effective. But what about you? How did you feel about episode 3?
Well, yeah, we're still in the middle of a story, so it's hard to gauge everything. I do feel the tension is being ratcheted up significantly, which is good. Finding out that Nick Fury's married to a Skrull. I was like, you dirty dog, you. I know what you're doing. I'm feeling like a redhead tonight, baby. What do you say? Hey, we're walking down the mall. You see that blonde? Go tap her on the shoulder real quick. Get some of that DNA cooking. I mean, it was like, It was shocking at first that we were asking on the last episode, what kind of woman would marry a guy like Nick Fury? And the answer is there isn't one. It had to be a Skrull that would do it. So, and that, they're back and forth, working with each other. And I don't know if you noticed the little paperwork that she handed off to him when they were meeting at the restaurant table. Yeah. Was the guy who was in charge of the Red Room for the Black Widows. She was handing him a little document saying this should keep, I can't remember the guy's name, and his team on their heels. But later on, looking at Twitter, everybody was like, oh, yeah, that's the guy who was in charge of the Black Widows in the Red Room. And I was like, oh, okay, great. So that flashback does have more connective tissue, which would kind of help explain a little bit more why Natasha and Nick were tight. Because they've been friends since the old days, so to speak. So, that's an interesting tie there.
Now, speaking of which, and again, I apologize, folks, we are going to talk a little bit story-wise, episode 3, but what did you think of kind of the reconstruction or reinvention of Nick Fury's career?
Oh, he got all the help from the Skrulls helping him out. He really didn't do as much. I actually like that quite a bit because it makes him more of a human. Like, before he was just the super spy badass. And it's not like we've ever seen him do anything incredibly badass except be the head of the team and keep a cool head and when stuff goes crazy. So he's always kind of acted like a leader. But to find out that having Skrulls in disguise, getting him all of his top secret information to help boost his career actually makes a lot of sense. And I was like, yeah, that actually just makes him more of a human that needs help of others.
Okay. I mean, I'm having a little trouble with a vulnerable Nick Fury because I really enjoyed Nick Fury badass. And just this whole notion of Nick Fury who came back from the blip and wasn't himself. In fact, that whole piece of dialogue where the wife was talking about you came back from the blip and then you disappeared again, right. That you retreated. So, I mean, again, we have 3 episodes left.
Well, part of the thing about Nick, real quick, is we've only seen him for like a minute or two in each film. He's never been like a super central character. In Avengers, the first Avengers, he was there a lot more. But for the most part, he's just been a supporting character who shows up, gives a task, and then buggers off. And this is the first chance where he's actually got enough room to actually have a character arc that takes him somewhere. And I don't think he's just had the luxury of space and time in a film to be given that growth. So I think this is a good place for it.
Okay. Well, again, like I said, we have 3 episodes left, and I'm intrigued to where this is going to go now. I mean, we've name-dropped Super Skrulls, so, and more to the point, anybody who's seen the trailer for this thing has seen Gravik, sort of manifesting Groot's ability, to sort of create a giant tree limb surging out of his arm.
So did you see the screenshot with the many different heroes that they're going to be taking bits from?
Yes. And in fact, correct me if I'm wrong, when he healed in the cafe after
the knife wound in the hand.
Yeah, when Talos stabbed him. Did I first see that in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
I honestly don't know, but remember the one woman was interrogating the Skrull and cut off a finger. Don't they immediately replace a lost limb? I really don't know. I know that on there was a computer screen that showed several names. Groot was among them. To see that in the trailers, no surprise. Obsidian Cull was another one.
There we go. Yeah,
that was named, and I can't recall, but there were like 2 others. There was a Jotunheim, I believe, a frost giant was one of them, and then the 4th now that I can't remember. But yeah, it's not like they're taking the power of Thor and stuff like that quite just yet. But it'll be interesting to see when they get a little melange. What I was kind of wondering was this machine that they're going to be infusing superpowers into Skrulls. Could it be used to create an X-Man?
Oh.
I wonder, could we get a little mutation going on with the help of a little machine? That would be a nice little way to launch some of that into the MCU.
Okay. Now, one final thing here, and we're going to suggest you jump ahead a minute or so in the show, because Aaron and I are going to talk about something that happened in episode 3 that potentially is going to have an impact on episodes 4, 5, and 6. When Maria Hill was killed at the end of episode 1, okay, we knew she was gone because we had the scene with the mom, and in fact, they started off episode 2 with basically a shot from above of her bleeding out before.
No.
Nick Fury
On episode 2, they started off with the coffin being loaded into the plane.
Well, I'm talking about the recap.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead. Yes, the recap.
So they shot up above, and her bleeding out. And you're right. Coffin loaded onto the plane, the grieving mom, that sort of thing. So this is not open for debate. Have you been paying attention to what's being said about maybe Gaia isn't in fact dead? I mean, we saw her shot. We saw a wound in her chest. But there's a number of folks who have been going over the various trailers for the show and pointing out that's Emilia Clarke in scenes we haven't showed up in the show.
I'll tell you why I think, and this was just from the way they shot that scene. Now, like you said, with Maria Hill, they did the shot from above,
there we go,
looking straight down with the bleeding out.
Yep.
Okay, so in this case, she gets shot, she's laying flat on her back in the middle of the street, and then they have this shot where the car is driving away and it's out of focus, like it's off in the distance. And that, just the way that camera is focused would have been perfect if she would have sat upright.
There we go.
And her head would have shown up in that. It would have been in focus. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
And I think the editor went, nope, let's cut it right before she sits up and leave that a mystery. Leave it hanging. Okay. Just because of the way that the car lights driving away were out of focus. That's my belief there.
Okay. You and me both, the way that was framed and the choices. So I have this uneasy feeling somewhere between 4 and 6 we're going to see her. I mean, as you mentioned, just sit up in that shot and her storyline continues.
Now, before we get out of spoiler territory, I got to throw a little monkey wrench into the works here.
Okay.
Latest conspiracy theory on the Twitter is Rhodey's a Skrull.
Yeah.
And now if you think about that conversation they had at the diner or the restaurant or the bar or whatever, where Rhodey stripped Nick of all of his duties, well, what if he's not even got the power to do that? What if he's a Skrull in disguise and Nick thinks that he has no authority, and he actually still does. He just doesn't use it because he thinks he's been demoted. Now, at the very end of this episode, Nick's wife picks up the phone to make a call, and I swear that sounded just like Rhodey's voice.
Well, you see, now that the interesting thing, I was going to defer to you as King audio professional, because when I watched episode 3, it was this morning at my kitchen table with a set of headphones on, watching it on my laptop. So I was not using high grade, so I could barely, I saw that Charlene Woodard was talking into her phone, but I couldn't hear who was at the other end. But yeah, the way Rhodey behaved in that scene was not the Rhodey I've previously seen in the MCU. So that would certainly explain a lot. But I think this limited series, with so much of the info they've dropped, like, again, 1 million Skrulls on Earth, and hard to know who's who. Though that said, I have to say, in episode 2, Olivia Colman is the British version of Nick Fury, is really used in the show as Paprika, but man, when she comes in, she is just so much fun.
Yeah.
And she's definitely this badass who, at the same time, it's very proper, and, it's like, and I love, she clips the, for example, that moment where she clips the finger off of the Skrull, and, oh, okay, that's settled. And then just moves on with her interrogation. It's like,
she's definitely needs to be in more material in the MCU.
Oh.
She's a welcome addition, absolutely.
Absolutely. All right, and speaking of welcome additions, the Stan Lee documentary that recently debuted on Disney Plus, the smart choices that the filmmakers made, having Stan tell the story in his own voice, and this took hundreds of hours of going through thousands of recordings and that sort of thing, and looking for the individual pieces of audio. But honestly, one of my favorite episodes of Mud that we've ever done is the one that we did back in November of 2018, where you put together a personal tribute to Stan and talked about how much he meant to you. So I was just wondering, given how long you've been following this man's career and how much you know about Stan's life and what he accomplished, what you thought of the film.
Well, it started off with, it's not quite claymation. And I don't even know if it's digital or if they actually built little models and then filmed it. But whatever it is, it's really neat, and I liked it so very much because you start off with Stan narrating, and almost the entirety of this is Stan in Stan's own words, which I think is great. And so, yeah, he's telling a lot of the stories, and really, even though I've heard Stan tell the creation of the Spider-Man story a bazillion times, this one still had a few new lines in it that I hadn't heard in other variations. But it's still the same old story, just with a fresh coat of paint. But the way that they did the little, I don't want to call them animations necessarily, but the claymation or the computer graphics, whatever it is, looked really sharp, and it really helped tell a story and set you in a time and a place in a fun and creative way when you don't have the actual photos and video footage of that event. You kind of want something to put up on the screen, because if you just have a talking head, it gets kind of boring to sit there and just look at the talking head for an hour. And you kind of have to put something else up on the screen that supports the story that you're being told. And I think that was one of the things where they did a really great job of using and the other thing about this is I can hear a difference from one tape to another. So if it were to be Stan speaking on, February of 1975 and they jump to, December of 1982, you'll hear a difference in the audio quality of those two recordings side by side. So what I really found amazing was a lot of these stories are told in the same telling on that same recording front to back. And they'll get like one complete story, and then they'll jump to like maybe a different narrator's voice of maybe Jack Kirby or someone like that for a minute. And then they'll come back with a different recording of Stan from a different era that continues the story. So they did a really great job of piecing all of these puzzle pieces together to give you a beginning, a middle, and an end, even though these recordings weren't necessarily done in the linear style of beginning to end. One of my favorite bits in the film, because we were just talking about the little bit of heat between Mr. Stan Lee and John Romita Sr., and they do cover that. And Stan, he does this thing, well, I come up with the ideas and, I give it to someone else. And in Stan's mind, he created it. And then, you get Romita saying, well, I drew the darn thing and I had to, storyboard everything and I created this. And they have that difference of opinion. And that's not hidden or shied away from it all. But there's this little bit towards the end where apparently John Romita Sr. is being interviewed on the radio, physically in studio, and the DJ's like, oh, we're so happy to have you here, and oh boy, we've got a surprise for you. On the other end of the phone is a longtime friend, Stan Lee. And this is probably after they haven't spoken in a couple of years. And it starts off so very cordial, Stan, oh, hey, how you doing there? It's so good to talk to you, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, very cordial back and forth, and then it gets to yeah, but when someone has an idea and you give it to someone else, they're the creator. And then it's like, oh, no. And you can just see they're trying to be polite because they know they're in public. But man, they do not agree on what the other person is saying in this moment. And it's nice to be able to hear them disagreeing, amicably in public, because you always get the whole, so-and-so said this, or they may have seen a thing and reported about it, and it's always secondhand news type of thing. But this was actually the two of them hashing it out publicly and politely. And I thought that was just a really nice touch, because it always seems so bitter. So-and-so's being sued for some money because they didn't get the rights or, the credit that they deserve. And this kind of goes to support, yeah, they didn't agree on it, but really, when you sit at home and you watch this yourself, play judge for a minute. How do you feel? Did Stan create it because he had the idea of a kid who had problems who dresses up as a spider guy? Or do you credit the guy who drew the costume and the kid with the glasses and all of that stuff? Because, I mean, really, I think they should both get credit. Split it down the middle, 50-50.
Evidently, the one note that Disney supposedly gave David Gelb, as he was putting together this documentary. And it's the very same note that Disney always gives to anybody who's making a movie now about Walt. And it's like, we don't want any images of him smoking.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So if you go through this film, but if you think about when Stan came up through the industry and more to the point, just remember everything you saw on Mad Men, the 1960s, it was all in a haze of smoke. Everybody smoked. But that was the whole thing, that yes, the images that you pick to support this, the video, we can't have Stan smoking. So other than that Disney thing, we're fine with this take on it. We're fine with what you were just talking about, the John Romita Sr. moments where, it's like there's actually some push and pull about who created what character. And I have to ask, though, Aaron, do you think, though, given that Disney is talking about, well, this is going to be the definitive, the authoritative thing, this is what we're going to have in Disney Plus if you go to the Marvel section and are looking to learn more about Stan Lee, do you think we're finished talking about Stan Lee yet?
No, because as long as you can make money off the man's name, they will. And I mean, that's very,
wow.
Honestly, seriously, it is.
No, you're not wrong. This is Disney, after all. Yes, okay.
I had just seen today.
Yeah.
Actually, this is from July 1st. Jess Larson is apparently a writer for a television show that was up on Hulu.
Yep.
And he was disappointed to find out they're taking off all of our episodes off of Hulu today, the day after word of cancellation. These businesses are heartless and greedy. Art should be timeless. This is what we are striking for. And one of the follow-up points that he made about this type of decision-making is there will never be another Buckaroo Banzai. There will never be another cult movie that didn't find its place in theaters but did find a home and love on VHS. Because if it doesn't hit within the first couple of weeks and they yank it off, how is anybody going to find it later? It won't be able to have that chance for cult status. So I'm thinking, just because of the way things are going on with, how Disney is, we got cost-cutting measures and Zaslav over at Warner Brothers Discovery just slashing stuff left and right. I think right now, if you're a consumer of this media and you really, really enjoy it, just put that stuff on loop for the afternoon while you're at work, just so it gets spins on the old counter back at headquarters, and that way maybe we can prevent things from just being blasted off the face of the earth because it didn't have immediate success on day one.
It is a strange. You're talking about Crater, right? The Disney Plus series. It just
they
debuted.
were on Hulu, but
Hulu.
the Disney Plus also took off Single Drunk Female. Which I don't know who the woman is that's connected to that, but she was also chiming in on her project being canceled and taken off of their platform. So I mean, there's a lot of creators out there who put their heart and soul into a thing, and then the company put it up for a week and it didn't immediately catch wildfire.
It is a genuinely strange time in the industry, and the terrible part is that so many of these streaming services are just nowhere near profit and what they promised Wall Street, so that they are making some just flat out startling moves. And circling back to Stan now, and we're definitely going to hear more about who did what in regard to Marvel Comics, because Mark Evanier, who wrote Kirby King of Comics, this was the book he wrote back in 2008.
No, not yet.
A wonderful book. It actually deservedly picked up the Eisner that year for the best comic-related book. Mark, who actually worked with Jack after he left Marvel, and I want to say during the period he was working at DC, but Mark is actually working on the definitive Kirby biography right now. So we're probably a couple of years out yet from that book actually showing up on store shelves. But Mark is talked about Jack and Stan's relationship, and I'm going to be fascinated further on down the line to see what else we can learn about Mr. Lee when we finally get to read the Jack Kirby book. But, of course, the other thing that I always find fascinating is our Mr. Adams' other podcast that he does, 32nd Street. What's coming up next?
Well, this week's episode, we focus on jingles, how we get little ditties stuck in your head, so that way anytime you're ready for a hamburger, you're thinking the McDonald's jingle. And I mean, there's so many that we've been bombarded with over the many decades.
My dad was principal of an elementary school in Massachusetts, and they did a campaign once. They were raising money for playground equipment, and it was literally kids bringing in box tops, and they collected enough box tops that a representative from a giant cereal manufacturer came to the school and presented them with a check for like $10,000 in playground equipment. And so my dad was there for the presentation, and what they did is they filled the auditorium with all the kids in the school so they could see that, here's the $10,000 checks, and the kids could stand up and cheer, But there was an advertising rep there who said, before we present the check, can I go up and on stage, can I talk to little kids for a moment? And my dad was like, yeah, okay. And the guy went on stage and for like a minute just said, kids, I got a question. What comes in the little blue jug? And the kids were like, Dynamo! And he marched through 10 different ad slogans and jingles and that sort of thing. And the kid, 300 kids shouted out the response to any of them. And he and that was the thing. He just stepped up stage and said, nope, just wanted to be sure that I'm doing.
That the jingles work?
That the jingles work. And my dad said it was the most chilling thing he ever saw. To see these 300 sweet little kids suddenly become Madison Avenue robots. I know exactly who that character is. I know exactly what that song is. And it's like, wow. So,
there used to be a number of commercials that played so heavily when I was a child that when it got to the announcer tag, I would immediately go from like 9-year-old boy into announcer mode of 1390 Bagley Street, Alpena, Michigan, 48604. And my dad would shake his head and be like, man, something is broken in my kid. And and now it's my career.
There you go.
And he's like, oh, okay, it kind of starts to make sense now.
That
So,
it does.
Yep, next 32nd Street, we talk about jingles, how we brainwash you and train you, and then you can't get the little ditty out of your head, and next thing you know, you're scarfing down a cheeseburger.
All right. I'm very, very much looking forward to hearing that one. By the way, we do have some other podcasts here that, if you have the chance, folks, you want to check out. We, of course, have The Mothership, Disney Dish, which I do with Len Testa. Likewise, we have Fine Tuning, which I do with Drew Taylor. And by the way, I don't know if you heard the news, Mr. Taylor's podcast, the one he does with Charles Hood, Light the Fuse, has just become the official Mission Impossible podcast. The Paramount has brought it in-house, which I thought was very, very cool.
Apparently, Tom Cruise had to go in there and put somebody in a headlock until they did it.
I have heard that same story, which I thought was very, very cool. And we have a brand new episode of Looking at Lucasfilm coming up where we talk about what happened with Dial of Destiny and what went on with the box office there. Anyway, folks, tell you what, if you could do Aaron and I a favor, if you could head on over to Apple Podcasts and rate and recommend, well, not just the show you're listening to right now, Marvelous Disney, but also 32nd Street, that would be incredibly helpful. Likewise, if you really like what you heard here tonight, you want to head over to Bandcamp and subscribe, that would be cool as well. Aaron, also, I so enjoy, when you show up on the Twitter. Can you tell the nice folks how they can find you there?
Yes, you can find me at Azaprod, AZAPROD. If you tweet something, you better make it damn good because I've got 599 views. I've only got one view left for the day before my counter resets. Damn you, Elon!
Yeah, it did get a little interesting.
It kind of reminds me of the bit from one of the Star Wars Family Guy parodies where they're like, "Yeah, hold your fire." Like, what are you paying by the laser now? When the escape pod gets jettisoned, they're like, "Yeah, good point. Are you paying by the laser? Are we paying by the tweet? Is that what's going on?" Anyway,
very true, very true. All right. Speaking of us, though, you can still find me on Twitter and Instagram as Jim Hill Media, and over on Facebook as Jim Hill Media News. Anyway, folks, that's going to do it for this week. Thank you so much for listening. And on behalf of Mr. Adams, we hope to see you again soon.